John had always dreamed of exploring new worlds, but nothing could have prepared him for the alien planet he had just landed on. The sky was a deep violet, and the air was thick with the scent of unfamiliar plants. He had come here on a routine mission to gather resources for his crew, but what he found was far beyond anything he had expected. His ship touched down gently on the lush green ground. John stepped out, adjusting the visor of his helmet. He had seen maps of the planet before, but they hardly did it justice. The towering trees stretched up like the trunks of ancient giants, their leaves shimmering in colors that didn't belong to any world he had ever known. The ground beneath, his boots felt soft, like moss, and the faint hum of an unknown energy source buzzed in the distance. As John moved deeper into the planet's dense forest, something caught his eye. A silhouette, a massive figure moving between the trees, its height impossible to ignore. His heart skipped a beat. It was unlike any creature he had seen before, and for a moment he wondered if he was seeing things. Into a clearing, and John froze in his tracks. There, standing in the sunlight, was the tallest alien he had ever seen. She was easily over 8 feet tall, her body covered in a shimmering skin that glowed softly under the sun's rays. Her eyes were large and dark, seemingly endless, as if they could see into the very soul of whoever met them. She wore a form of armor that looked both ancient and sophisticated, yet it was her presence, her sheer size, that left John speechless. She was strong and graceful, standing with an air of quiet authority. John instinctively took a step back, unsure of what to do. The alien woman didn't seem hostile, but there was something intimidating about her. She stood there, silent, observing him with an expression that was difficult to read. John's mind raced, but he knew he had to be careful. He wasn't here to fight, and he certainly wasn't prepared to face something like this without understanding. At first, he cleared his throat, his voice shaking slightly as he spoke. "I mean you no harm," he said, his words slow but steady. The alien woman tilted her head as if considering his words. Her gaze softened ever so slightly, but she did not speak. The silence stretched out between them, thick and heavy, like a wall neither dared to cross. John took a deep breath. "I'm here to help," he added, hoping that the sincerity in his voice would break through whatever barrier stood between them. She studied him for a long moment, and just as John began to think she might leave without saying a word, she finally moved. Her massive hand reached out, not in aggression, but in curiosity. It was clear she was testing him, trying to gauge his intentions. John felt his pulse quicken, but he held his ground, not wanting to back away. Her hand hovered just inches from his face, and John dared not flinch. After a few seconds, she withdrew her hand and slowly stepped back. The tension in the air seemed to ease, but John's heart was still racing. He wasn't sure whether he had passed some kind of test, or if the alien woman was simply intrigued. "By him, I'm John," he said, trying to break the silence with something more human. "What's your name?" For the first time, the alien woman spoke. Her voice was low and smooth, like a deep hum that resonated through the air. "Nisa," she replied. The word felt strange on her lips, and John had to focus to catch it. "Nisa," John repeated, the name rolling off his tongue with a sense of reverence. "I've never seen anyone like you before." Nisa's gaze didn't leave him. "I am different," she said, her tone flat but not unkind. "I do not belong here." The words caught John off guard. He had been expecting the alien to speak of her species or her planet, but instead, she spoke with a sense of alienation. It was clear that she didn't see herself as part of this world, and something in her tone made John feel a deep empathy for her. "Why not?" he asked, curiosity getting the better of him. You seem to belong just fine to me." Expression didn't change, but there was a flicker in her eyes. "I am different," she repeated. "I am too large, too strong. The others fear me. They do not accept me." John couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. He had dealt with loneliness before, but he had never been made to feel like he didn't belong because of something as uncontrollable as his size or appearance. He could see the weight of isolation in Nisa's eyes, and he couldn't stand the thought of her being alone in a place where she didn't fit in. "I don't fear you," John said quietly, stepping a little closer. He was beginning to realize that Nissa wasn't just a stranger. She was a being in pain. Someone who had been cast aside for reasons she couldn't change. Nissa looked at him, her gaze intense, as if searching for any sign of insincerity. But there was none. John wasn't sure where the words came from, but he found himself saying, "Maybe I can help you. Maybe we can help each other." For the first time since they had met, Nissa smiled just a little. It wasn't much, but it was enough for John to see that, beneath her intimidating exterior, she was just as vulnerable as any other being. The days that followed were filled with strange beauty and danger. John and Nissa began to travel deeper into the alien wilderness. The planet, though stunning in its otherworldly beauty, was far from safe. Dangerous creatures roamed the dark forests, and the environment itself seemed to have a life of its own. Yet the more time John spent with Nissa, the more he began to understand her. She wasn't just an alien. She was someone who had been abandoned by her own kind, left to wander. This planet alone, John had never felt so far from home. His mission had been simple: gather resources, report back to his crew, and return. But now, he found himself caught between two worlds, his own and the strange, alien world of Nissa. He never imagined he would be so close to someone like her, let alone find himself standing side by side with her through the trials of this dangerous landscape. Nissa was always calm and measured, her movements deliberate and strong. Her towering presence provided him with a sense of safety, even in the face of the unknown. Yet, there was always a sadness in her eyes, something that made John wonder what had caused her to be so alone. One morning, as they walked through a dense patch of towering, spiny trees, John spoke up. "Nissa, why are you alone here? Surely there are others like you. You don't have to keep running." Nissa didn't answer immediately. She moved ahead, carefully picking her path through the trees. John followed, his boots crunching softly. On the forest floor, the air was thick with humidity, and the sunlight filtered through the leaves in dappled patterns, casting strange shadows on the ground. Finally, Nissa spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "There are others, yes, but they are not like me. I was born different." She paused and turned to look at him. "I was born too strong, too tall. The others fear me. They call me a monster." John felt a pang of sympathy. He had heard stories of how alien species could be unforgiving to those who didn't fit their mold. But to be cast aside simply because of one's size, to be treated like a monster, it was unfair. Nissa, despite her incredible power, was vulnerable in her own way. John began to see the weight of her isolation, a burden she had carried for as long as she could remember. "You're not a monster, Nissa," he said, his voice steady but soft. "You're just different, that's all." She didn't respond right away, and for a moment John wasn't sure if she had even heard him. But then Nissa's gaze softened. It was only a brief moment, but it was enough for John to realize that she was beginning to trust him. Maybe, just maybe, he could help her see herself in a different light. As the days passed, their bond grew. They shared stories of their respective worlds, their lives. John spoke of Earth, of its cities, and its people. Nissa told him of her home planet, a place that had once been her home until the others had decided she didn't belong. They spoke of their hopes and dreams, and even though their worlds were vastly different, they found a shared understanding. One evening, as the two of them sat around a small campfire, Nissa began to speak in a quiet voice. "I was once part of a clan, but when I came of age, they told me I was no longer welcome. My body, it was too large. I was different, too strong for them." John looked at her, his heart heavy. He had heard bits and pieces of this story before, but hearing it out loud from her lips made it all the more real. Nissa had been rejected by her people, not for any crime or wrongdoing, but simply because of how she was born. It was a cruel fate, one that left her with scars no one could see. "Is that why you're afraid?" John asked, his voice gentle. "Afraid to get close to others?" Nissa stared into the flickering flames, her expression unreadable. "Not afraid. I've simply learned that it is better to be alone than to be rejected again. It is easier to live with the pain of loneliness than the pain of being cast aside." John's heart ached for her. He had never experienced anything like the rejection Nissa had faced, but he could understand her fear. To open up to someone, to let them in knowingly, to be rejected again, it was a fear that gripped her heart. "Nisa," John said, his voice firm yet kind. "You don't have to be alone anymore. I'm here, and I won't leave you. You have nothing to fear from me." She looked up at him then, her eyes searching his face for any hint of insincerity. But there was none. John meant every word he said. "I've never been close to anyone before," Nissa whispered. "Not like this." Reached out and gently placed a hand on her arm, his touch reassuring. "It's okay. We'll take it slow. No one is asking you to be someone you're not." Nissa didn't say anything, but she didn't pull away either. The two of them sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling between them, the warmth from the flames casting shadows on their faces. That night, as they settled down to sleep under the stars, John couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. They were no longer strangers, no longer two individuals, lost in the vastness of space. They had found something in each other, a connection that bridged the gap between their worlds. But even as he drifted off to sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to change. He had no idea just how much. Nissa had shared a glimpse of her pain with him, but there were still many secrets hidden beneath the surface secrets that he would soon learn. And as they continued their journey through the alien world, John would soon discover that their bond would be tested in ways he never could have imagined. The journey through the alien wilderness was becoming increasingly difficult. The creatures that roamed the planet were unlike anything John had ever encountered. There were massive insects, tall, towering beasts with sharp teeth and strange, glowing plants that seemed to come alive in the dark. Despite the dangers, John and Nissa had become a team each, depending on the other to survive. Nissa, with her towering strength and natural abilities, was a force to be reckoned with. Her skills in combat and survival were unmatched, and John had come to rely on her as both a protector and a guide. But there were still moments when Nissa seemed distant, as if her mind was elsewhere, trapped in memories of a past she could not escape. One evening, as they made camp near a small stream, John watched Nissa from a distance. She was gazing out at the water, her thoughts seemingly far away. The sky above them was painted with hues of orange and purple as the sun began to set. Casting a soft glow over the landscape, "Nissa," John called softly, walking toward her. "You seem lost in thought." She turned to face him, her dark eyes meeting his with a mixture of curiosity and sadness. "I am thinking about what comes next," she said, her voice low. "I have never been this close to anyone before, John. I'm not sure how to deal with these feelings." John could feel the weight of her words, the hesitation in her voice. He knew that Nissa had lived a life filled with rejection and isolation, but now, with him by her side, she was beginning to open up. It wasn't easy for her. Trust didn't come easily when you had been hurt for so long. "You don't have to figure it all out at once," John replied, sitting beside her. "We have time. We don't have to rush anything." Nissa looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any hint of insincerity, but there was none. He meant what he said. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more between them, something neither of them had fully acknowledged. "We should keep moving tomorrow," Nissa said, changing the subject. "The path ahead is dangerous, and I don't know if we're ready for what's coming." John frowned, concerned. "What do you mean?" Nissa's gaze hardened, a flash of determination crossing her face. "There are others, my people. They will not be happy to see me with you. You are a human, and they will never accept you. I know them better than anyone. If we are not careful, they will try to take you from me." John's heart raced. He had known that Nissa's people had rejected her, but the thought of facing them, of being in danger because of their relationship, was something he hadn't considered. He had come to care deeply for Nissa, and the thought of losing her, or, worse, putting her in danger, was unbearable. "I won't leave you, Nissa," he said firmly. "We'll face whatever comes together. I'm not afraid of your people. I'm not afraid of anything if it means keeping you safe." Nissa's expression softened, but her eyes betrayed the deep worry she was feeling. "You don't understand. These people, my people, are powerful. It will stop at nothing to take you from me, even if it means violence. You are not prepared for what they will do." John reached out, placing his hand gently on hers. "We'll make it through. We're stronger than they think." Nissa shook her head, a flicker of sadness passing over her face. "You don't know what you're asking? I can't ask you to do this, to risk your life for me." John stared at her, his expression unwavering. "You're not asking me, Nissa. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you." For a moment, there was silence. Nissa seemed to be struggling with her emotions, torn between the desire to protect him and the fear of losing him. But John's words seemed to settle something deep inside her. She had always been alone, and the thought of someone standing by her side, someone willing to fight for her, was both overwhelming and reassuring. "John," Nissa said quietly, her voice filled with uncertainty, "I have to warn you. There is a way to make sure they will never separate us, a way to bind us forever." John's curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Nissa hesitated, her eyes flickering away from his. "There is an ancient custom among my people, a ritual. It's called the binding. It's not just a promise or a vow. It's a physical bond, a connection that ties us together. If you accept, it will change everything. You will become a part of me as much as I am a part of you." John was silent for a long time, considering her words. He didn't fully understand the implications of what she was suggesting, but he could see the weight of it in her eyes. This wasn't just about them being together. It was about something deeper, something more permanent. "I don't want to lose you, Nissa," John said softly. "If this is the only way to keep us together, then I'm willing to do it. I don't care about the risks." Nissa's gaze softened, but there was still a hint of sadness. "It will change you. It will change everything about how we live. Are you truly ready for that?" John took a deep breath. "I'm ready. Trust you, Nissa, and I believe in us." Nissa studied him for a moment longer, her heart heavy with the realization of what this choice meant. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Then it's done," as they sat by the fire, the stars above them shining brightly. John felt a deep sense of commitment to Nissa. He didn't know what the future held or what the binding would do to their lives. But he knew one thing for certain. They were in this together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight they had made a choice. Together, they would face whatever came next. The days after the binding ritual were strange. John could feel the change in the air between him and Nissa. It wasn't just the physical bond that now tied them together, but something deeper, something that seemed to make them more attuned to each other's emotions. It was as though they could sense each other's thoughts, even without speaking. It was a bond unlike anything John had ever experienced, and though it was overwhelming at times, it also gave him a sense of peace he had never known. But the peace was short-lived. The journey ahead was still perilous. They had to leave the safety of their small camp and continue traveling through the alien landscape. Nissa had warned John about the dangers of her people, and now he was starting to understand what she meant. The world around them seemed to pulse with an energy that was both beautiful and dangerous, like the calm before a storm. One afternoon, as they crossed a wide, barren plain, Nissa stopped suddenly, her senses alert. John, sensing her tension, paused and looked around. There was something in the Arananese that seemed to ripple through the ground beneath them. "What is it?" John asked, his voice low. "They are here," Nissa whispered, her voice tight with fear. Before John could ask who, the ground beneath them trembled and a large group of figures appeared from behind a rocky outcrop. They were tall, their skin a deep shade of green, their eyes bright and menacing. They were the ones Nissa had warned him about, the people who had rejected her. The ones who would stop at nothing to claim her as their own. At the head of the group was a male, even taller than Nissa, with a broad chest and a stern face. His eyes locked onto Nissa, and the anger in them was clear. "Nissa," he called out in a deep, commanding voice. "You return after abandoning your people? Do you truly believe you are welcome here?" Nissa's expression hardened, and for the first time since they had met, John saw fear in her eyes. She stepped in front of him, as though trying to shield him from what was to come. "I never abandoned you," Nissa said, her voice steady, despite the fear that gripped her. "I was cast out. You turned your back on me, and now you come here to demand my return? I am no longer part of your world. 8. The leader's eyes narrowed, and he took a step forward, his posture imposing. You are wrong. You were never cast out. You were rejected because you were a danger to us all. You are too strong, too different. And now you have chosen a human over your own kind. You have sealed your fate. John stepped forward, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. I'm not here to fight. I just want to help her. Nisa's not your enemy. The leader's gaze flickered to John, and for a moment there was a dangerous silence. The other members of the group shifted, their eyes trained on John with a mixture of suspicion and disdain. The tension in the air was thick, and John could feel it pressing down on him. You are the human who dares to stand with her. The leader spat. You know nothing of our ways, and yet you think you can save her. She is ours to command, not yours to claim. John's heart raced, but he refused to back down. She's not your property, he said, his voice firm. Nissa is her own person, and she chooses who she wants to be with. The leader growled, and with a swift motion, he drew a weapon from his side-along, curved blade, gleaming in the sunlight. If you truly care for her, human, you will learn that there is no place for you here. Leave now, or face the consequences. John felt his pulse quicken, his body tense with the anticipation of what was to come. He knew that Nissa's people were powerful, but he couldn't bring himself to leave her, not after everything they had been through. He wasn't going to run, not now, not when she needed him most. You can't make me leave, John said, his voice low and steady. I won't abandon her. Nissa's eyes flickered with something between gratitude and fear. John, you don't know what you're facing. These people don't care about who's right or wrong. They'll destroy anyone who stands in their way. John turned to her, his gaze soft but resolute. I'm not going anywhere. We're in this together. Before Nissa could respond, the leader lunged forward, his blade slashing through the air toward John. Nissa's reaction was immediate. With a speed and strength that John had never seen before, she moved between them, blocking the strike with her arm. The force of the blow sent her stumbling back, but she didn't falter. Enough, Nissa shouted, her voice booming with authority. This ends now. The leader stopped, his blade still in the air, but his expression faltered. He clearly hadn't expected Nissa to fight back. She stood tall, her body radiating a strength that John had only begun to fully understand. Wasn't the weak, isolated woman she had once been. She was powerful, capable, and fiercely determined to protect the one person who had never turned his back on her. John stood by her side, his eyes never leaving the leader. We're not afraid of you, he said, his voice strong. The leader studied them both for a long moment. The tension in the air was palpable, but something had shifted. The leader's eyes narrowed, and he finally lowered his blade. You are lucky, human, he said, his voice filled with a mix of disdain and grudging respect. But this is not over. Nissa may have chosen you, but you will soon learn that there are consequences for defying us. With that, the group turned and walked away, disappearing into the wilderness. John let out a breath he hadn't realized. He was holding. The danger wasn't over, but for now they had one. Together. The days that followed the confrontation with Nissa's people were tense. John could feel the weight of their warning hanging over them like a dark cloud. The leader of Nissa's people had made it clear that they would not stop coming for her. But John wasn't scared, at least, not in the way he thought he should be. Being with Nissa, knowing that she trusted him, gave him a strength he had never experienced before. He wasn't about to back down now. Nissa, however, was different. She had always lived her life with caution, always moving to avoid confrontation. Now, however, she seemed to be on edge, her mind constantly working as she tried to figure out the next steps. It was clear to John that the threat wasn't over, but she hadn't fully shared what was weighing on her heart. One night, as they sat near a campfire under a sky full of stars, Nissa finally spoke, her voice soft but resolute. There is a way to make sure they never come for us again, but it's not something I've ever considered before. John turned to her, his interest piqued. What do you mean? Nissa took a deep breath, as though gathering the courage to speak of something deeply personal. My people have a custom, an ancient ritual. It's called the binding. It is a ceremonial bond, one that ties two people together forever. Once it is performed, there is no turning back. John's eyes narrowed with concern. Is it dangerous? Nisa shook her head slowly, her gaze fixed on the fire. It's not in the way you're thinking. The binding isn't about pain or harm. It's about commitment. It's a promise that no matter what happens, you will be bound to the other person. Your fates are tied together. And once it is done, neither of us can ever leave the other. John's heart raced. This was a big decision, one he hadn't expected to be asked to make, to be bound to someone forever. It was something that meant everything to Nissa, something that could change both of their lives forever. But the more John thought about it, the more he realized that he didn't need to think. He already knew the answer. I don't need to think about it, Nissa, John said, his voice steady and sure. I'm already with you, and I will stay with you. I don't care what this ceremony means. Just know that I don't want to be anywhere else but by your side. Nissa looked at him, her expression a mixture of disbelief and hope. She had lived so long believing that no one would ever accept her, that she was destined to live alone. But now, here was John, someone who wasn't afraid to stand by her, someone who had already chosen her, even without the ritual. You're sure? Nissa asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. This isn't something to take lightly. Once we do this, we will be tied together forever. There's no going back. John nodded, his gaze unwavering. I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Nissa looked away for a moment, as though considering his words, and then slowly she nodded. Then we will do it. Tomorrow we will begin. The next day, they prepared for the ritual. Nissa led John to a secluded clearing deep in the heart of the forest, where the trees grew tall and thick, their branches weaving together to form a natural canopy. The air was thick with the scent of fresh earth, and the sounds of distant creatures filled the silence. It was a place of power, a place where the binding had been performed for generations. In the center of the clearing was a large stone altar worn by time and the elements. It was here that the ritual would take place. As they approached, Nissa motioned for John to kneel beside her. She explained the process. There would be no grand gestures or words spoken, only the physical act of touching, allowing their energy to merge. It was the simplest yet most powerful act of connection. Nissa's hands shook slightly as she removed a small pendant from around her neck. It was a symbol of her people, an ancient mark of strength and unity. Handed it to John, who held it in his palm. The pendant glowed faintly with an ethereal light, and for a moment, John felt a surge of warmth run through his chest. We will exchange our hearts, Nissa said softly, not in words, but in touch. The binding will begin when our palms meet. John took a deep breath, feeling his pulse quicken. He extended his hand toward Nissa, and she did the same. As their palms touched, a wave of energy washed over them. John felt it first as a small tingle at the base of his spine, but it quickly grew into something much more intense. It was as though his very being was being drawn toward Nissa, and hers toward him. The world around them seemed to blur, the forest fading into the background. All that existed was the connection between them, the shared bond that now tied them. Together, John could feel the warmth of her energy, the strength of her spirit, and for the first time, he understood the depth of what Nissa had been carrying all this time. The isolation, the rejection, the pain, all of it had led to this moment. To this bond, as the energy between them intensified, John's vision blurred, and he felt his body sway. Nissa's hands were steady, her eyes closed in concentration. He could hear her breath steadying as the ritual reached its climax. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the energy surged, flooding his entire being with a sense of calm and peace. The ritual was complete. When John opened his eyes, he saw Nissa's face for the first time after the ritual had ended. Her eyes were no longer filled with the same uncertainty. They shone with a new kind of light, a light that spoke of belonging, of togetherness. Now we are one, she said softly, her voice filled with wonder. John nodded, his heart swelling with emotions he couldn't fully explain. Now we are. The sun was beginning to set, casting the clearing in a soft golden light. For the first time in what felt like forever, John didn't feel alone. And neither did Nissa. The night after the binding ceremony, John and Nissa sat by the fire, the flames casting long shadows around them. The world seemed quieter now, as if the planet itself was acknowledging the new bond between them. There were no more words between them, just the soft crackling of the fire and the peaceful silence of the night. The air felt different now, lighter somehow, as though they had crossed a threshold into a new chapter of their lives. John glanced at Nissa, who sat beside him, her eyes glowing in the firelight. She looked so different now, no longer burdened by the weight of rejection. She seemed at ease, a sense of belonging radiating from her. He had never seen her like this before, and it made his heart swell with pride. She wasn't the outcast she had always believed herself to be. She was strong, she was powerful, and she was his equal in every way. You know, John began, breaking the silence, I never thought I'd be here, on this alien planet with you, but now, it feels right. Nissa looked at him, a soft smile, tugging at the corners of her lips. I never thought I'd find someone like you, she said. Someone who would choose me, even when my people rejected me. John's heart skipped a beat. He had always known there was something special about Nissa, but hearing her say those words made everything they had gone through worth it. He didn't need anyone else. He had chosen her, and she had chosen him. I'm not going anywhere, John said, his voice steady with conviction. Oh, we'll face whatever comes next together. Nissa nodded, her eyes locking with his. There was no more doubt in the only certainty. Together, the next few days passed quickly, and the journey ahead seemed a little less daunting. The threat from Nissa's people still lingered. But they had both made a decision. They would face whatever came with the strength of their bond. They were no longer alone. One afternoon, as they were walking through the dense forest, they reached a small valley. The air was filled with the sweet scent of flowers, and the ground was soft beneath their feet.
Ow.
The valley seemed to hum with an energy that was both calming and powerful. It was a place unlike any they had encountered before. Nissa stopped and looked around, her expression filled with awe. This place, she said softly, it's sacred to my people. Only those who have proven themselves worthy are allowed to enter. John raised an eyebrow. And you think we've proven ourselves? Nissa smiled, the sadness that had once lingered in her eyes now gone. I believe we have. This place. It will give us strength for the journey ahead. As they walked deeper into the valley, they came across a large stone monument. It was ancient, worn by time, but still standing strong. Nissa knelt before it, her hands gently touching the cool surface of the stone. This is a place of power, Nissa explained. Here my people have come to seek guidance, strength, and wisdom. I've never brought anyone here before. John knelt beside her, his hand resting on hers. It feels peaceful, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Nissa looked up at him, her eyes filled with something that could only be described as hope. It is, and now it's our place too. They sat in silence for a while, allowing the energy of the place to fill them. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light over the valley. It was a moment of peace, a moment where they both felt truly at home in each other's presence. As the night fell and the stars began to twinkle above them, John realized something. Their bond was no longer just about survival. It was about trust, about belonging to each other in a way that went beyond anything he had ever known. They had both been through so much, and yet here they were, stronger than ever before, you know. John said after a while, his voice soft, I never thought I'd find something like this. I never thought I'd meet someone like you, someone who could change everything. Nissa turned to him, her expression tender. I never thought I'd have someone to share this with, but now I have you, and that's all I need. John smiled, his heart swelling with love for the woman sitting beside him. Then we'll make it. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together. Nissa's smile grew, and for the first time in a long while, she looked truly happy. Together. But the journey ahead wasn't going to be easy. Nissa's people would still come for them, and the world they lived in was filled with dangers. They hadn't even begun to understand. But for the first time, they weren't facing it alone. They had each other. That was all that mattered. As the fire burned low and the stars above them sparkled in the night sky, John took Nisa's hand in his. They didn't need words. The silence between them was more than enough. Their bond had been sealed not just by the ritual, but by the trust and love they had built together. And no matter what the future held, John knew one thing for certain. He would stand by her side forever.